Alrighty, welcome to strategy 2. This strategy is all about using video for reflection. Before we get started, I would like to make mention we had a couple of participants in our last session that had a different understanding of what we were covering in this strategy. So if we start talking about things and you're like, oh, this is not what I thought we were talking about, you will not hurt our feelings at all if you pop off. Again, this whole module and this whole series is for you and to get what you need out of it. So go where you need to go. That being said, I wanted to start off by having us take a look at this quote. And then as soon as you're done reading the quote, I want you to, in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, just talk about what makes you nervous about using video in your classroom. So when we're talking about filming in this session, we're talking about filming our classroom practices, whether that's full group, small group, data meetings, whatever, but you're filming so that you can then reflect on your practice and like you have that visual guide in like going back and reflecting on what you said, your body language, how you came off. So in that respect, what makes you nervous about using video in your classroom? Again, go ahead and pop that in the chat as soon as you're done reading that quote. All super valid concerns here. The other big one that I get when I'm first starting to coach around like utilizing film for reflection is like the thought of it being weaponized and like being used as a gotcha for like, oh, you didn't do this, this, and this. And so we'll get into like who you share your film with and like how you can use it for like that coaching relationship rather than like evaluative purposes as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so and we're really, you know, in this session, we want to be able to really take a look at how our instruction is impacting our students and what biases we have and being able to adjust our instruction so that we really are able to help our students in the ways that work best. And we don't know what we don't know. So being able to watch ourselves and reflect on that can be very, very impactful. So hopefully this will help us get there.
So like always, I'll give you the option if you would like to follow along with us. We're going to start talking about thinking through what you need to look for when you're using your video reflections, and then we'll get into how to record your lessons and how to know what to look for when you review your lessons. And then if you would like to work independently, you can click on that hyperlink for Module 6 additional resources and tutorials that has all of the guides that you need if you want to just like go off on your own path. And we recommend that you would spend this time working on any of the following that are in that work independently section, if you so choose to do so. Regardless, if you stay with us or you work independently, we're going to want to make sure that we return to the main room at 11:05. All right, so when we're talking about video, especially when we're talking about filming our class and looking for, you know, that to be an opportunity of reflection, we want to keep these considerations in mind. So the first thing that I always recommend is that you have a clear focus on what you're looking for. If you try to look up for everything, it gets to be super overwhelming, or you're so unfocused that you aren't picking up actual trends in things. So if you go into it with a focus of like a very specific thing that you're looking for, or that you're having other people help you look for, that can be super productive for you. Also, and I know we've all heard this like a million bajillion times, but having that growth mindset, reflection is about growth. It's not about like saying that you're a terrible teacher, you didn't do this right, or that like you were bad before. It's more about like, how can you always improve? And teaching is one of those professions where there is always room for improvement somewhere, especially with how things constantly like shift and evolve. We also want to make sure that like this is like, if you use film in your classroom, you're filming your classroom, you're filming your small groups, it's great for coaching, not great for formal observations. I don't know if it's been rewritten in the last couple of years, but when I was using film in my classroom, it was actually against like DCTA policy to like use that film for those formal LEAP observations instead of going in person for that. So you want to make sure that if you're sharing with like your evaluator or your coach, ILT members, that you're really clear with them that it's a coaching tool, it's not something that you want as a formal observation. The other thing that you should consider is that like you should look for, with film, it's a lot easier for you to go back and actually look at yourself and how your body language is, or your tone of voice when you're acting with specific students. And so instead of, if you have a student who is particularly challenging in your classes, you know, you struggle with the student behavior consistently, instead of filming so that you can shame that student and say, look at how bad you are, using that film to say like, okay, this is what I'm consistently noticing. And again, sharing that with your team or your coach or a member of the behavior team to say, look, this is what I'm trying, this is what I'm doing, and this is how the student is responding. What do you recommend that I try differently? That, along with, you know, obviously documenting those interventions, can help with behavior plans, can help with getting the student the support that they might need in order to be successful in your classes and other classes. And then lastly, make sure that you're sharing with people that you feel like are going to help you grow. So if that's with nobody, it's just with yourself, that is 100% okay. If it's with your planning team, because you notice that in your data, you consistently have lower scores than your teammates, awesome. If you feel like it's with the person who gives you LEAP evaluations because you've been working on, you know, I3 and you can't seem to get higher than a 4, and you want to show that like you're trying these strategies and have them give you feedback on that, would be a great person to share with. Or again, like members of the behavior team. But please do not, in your whole life ever, film your classroom and then put it on social media, or share it with parents. Even if it's a like, here's how your kid's showing up every day in my class, that's a huge violation of student privacy. If you have a situation where you're sharing outside of like the DPS realm, that requires all of your students to have signed data privacy agreements, film agreements, you'd probably have to get additional like parent agreements, admin stuff. Just don't share it. Again, this is for your personal growth. It's not to demonstrate like your classroom behavior outside of that school-wide space. That being said, if you want to share with a member of like central office, like your digital coach, totally fine, as long as it's within that DPS domain. So when you're like thinking about what you're reflecting on, you're thinking about those look-fors, you can use a variety of different data points to drive those look-fors. So one of those data points you can use is, you know, student reflection, and having students give you feedback on how they feel in your class. You can do that through any of these like ed tech options that we see here, depending on the type of reflection you want them to give. But having them give you feedback on, I feel like you're going too fast, or I feel like I don't want to answer questions because people will make fun of me if I get the wrong answer. Those give you data that you need to say, okay, when I'm looking at this film, I want to see how I'm addressing misconceptions, or how I'm addressing my checks for understanding or how long I give wait time. Those are really specific look fors that like you can actually time out on your video, and those help you like with that reflection component instead of I want to be a better teacher and I'm looking for me to have good teaching practices. So the more narrow, the better. Even if you don't have students fill out reflection forms, you can still use student data to drive your reflection. So let's say that you're looking at you're in a data meeting, you're looking at your interim data, and you're noticing that a specific subgroup of students is consistently scoring lower than the other subgroups. It might be worth your time then to look at your video and see how you're interacting with that subgroup, looking at students to see like, are you missing some of their body cues? Are you missing like that they might be like timidly raising their hand for help? That can help you in guiding like where those misconceptions are and how your teaching practice is coming off to different students. And so now we're gonna sort of like shift into the how of like, how do you physically record your classroom to get that video that you can reflect on? So there's a couple different options. When I was in the classroom, I used Swivel about once a week to record at least one of my lessons. Swivel is essentially like a little robot that you put on a tripod and attach an iPad to. You then wear a tracking like lanyard, and what that does is it makes it so that the iPad, like the base will swivel so that it follows you, and that lanyard also has the microphone on it, so it always picks up your voice so that you can clearly hear like what instructions you're giving or anything like that. If I was working with small groups and I wanted to film my small group instruction, I would just take my lanyard off and put it in the middle of the table so that it would pick up, the microphone would then pick up all of the students who are actively participating in my small group, rather than just me. So if you are like, yep, I would love that, it takes a lot of the issues with, the audio out of it. The video quality is still like, you set it up in one part of the room and like, yes, it like moves back and forth. It will not though like pan in on things. So if you're trying to like see what's actually on your board, you'll need to make sure that the lighting and everything is okay. But if you think that Swivel is for you, you want to try it out, the CRE team actually has a stock of Swivel devices that teachers can check out. And so to do that, you'll just need to email Tess Vigil. Her email address is up there, and she'll walk you through that checkout process. Once you get that Swivel, so she has like this full Swivel iPad, all of the connections that come with it. Once you get that, if you need help getting started or set up, we have some videos and articles that literally walk you through the entire process of like how to plug it in to how to start recording. Before you have your first recording though, I would recommend that you sign up for a free account with your DPS Google account. It's where it saves on a cloud, and then you can share from there. You can download or export your videos too.
Now, if you don't want to check out the Swivel and just want to keep it simple and use what you already have in your classroom, you can go ahead and just use an extra Chromebook or a teacher device to record yourself. This video probably won't be as great, as it won't follow you, and you may have some difficulty with the audios, but it still does a good job. It'll still give you a good idea of what's happening in your classroom and give you an opportunity to reflect on your instruction. If you are doing it, it's good for small groups in particular. So if you're doing like a small group center and you want to record yourself with just a few students, that'll work really well. But you can also use it for your whole class. You just want to make sure that you position it strategically. So finding a position that's maybe in like a corner of the room where you can really see everything. Something else to also consider will be audio. That is always going to be a little bit challenging. We'd recommend using like a wireless headphone, so check with your STR, STP if you have any in the building. If not, your own AirPads or even just a cheap set of wireless headphones will do the trick, so that that mic follows you and it records your interaction with students. So you may not necessarily get everything that's going on in the classroom with the audio, but at least you'll get your interactions, which is a big part of what you want to reflect on. You also want to consider video and lighting just to make sure you actually see what's going on. And then in order to record, you can use either Screencastify or Google Meet. If you're using Screencastify, make sure you select the webcam only option so you're not recording your computer screen but actually the video, or you can record on a Google Meet. And then those will go to your Google Drive, and then you can easily watch those. Once you have the video recorded, then you want to start thinking about how are you going to reflect on what you've seen. So again, you can reflect independently on this. You can watch the video from your Google Drive and just kind of think through what you're watching, or you have ways that you can share it. Video Ant is a tool that comes from the University of Minnesota. It's a web-based video annotation tool. So basically what you can do is record your video and then upload it. And then as you're watching the video, you can add time-stamped comments on it. So this is really great if you want to do it yourself, but it's also really great for sharing with like your PLC or your observer, just to get feedback. And if we go to the next slide, we can kind of see how it looks. So you'll have the video on one side, and then along the right, you can see those time-stamped comments. So you can share it, and like as you're noticing things, you can write that in there, and then that'll be time-stamped, so you know exactly when that's happening, and just make it easier for you to reflect and make it really easy for you to share with others, and just have a good conversation around it. In addition to being able to share it, you also want to think about other ways that you can reflect on your teaching. So a few other tools that we would recommend if you really want to just have that time for self-reflection. One is Google Forms. It's a great way to engage students and in guided inquiry, and this can be done anonymously. So you can reflect yourself, you can record yourself and reflect on what you see, but it's also good to get student feedback and really hear from students what their perceptions are of your class. So using Google Forms for feedback is a great tool. One thing I would recommend though, if you are going to use Google Forms, is to allow it to be anonymous so that students give you true and honest feedback. So in order to do that, when you are sharing, just make sure you're not collecting email responses, and then you can get true feedback from your students. This links to a feedback form that you can use or edit if you'd like to. Google Forms on the next slide we can see is also good for your own reflection. So this next one is a sample reflection from Zaretta Hammond's framework for CRT. That really just helps you think through where you stand on your instruction and how you structure your class so that student voice is heard. And that Google form is linked as well. Lastly, Google spreadsheets are also a great way to just keep track of your interactions. So once you have recorded yourself, being able to just have a reflection form to go through. We talked about how you don't want to be looking at everything that's going on in the classroom. You want to focus in on some specific things. So this sheet that's linked in here has a lot of different ways that you can reflect on your teaching. So you can look at just the types of interactions that you're having. Am I having positive interactions, negative interactions? Am I calling on students? That's that first one. You can look at measuring teacher talk time versus student talk time, just to see how much am I doing the talking and how much am I allowing students to talk. There are multiple tabs in the sample sheet that's linked here. And so you can select what you want to use as your reflection form as you're watching your video. You can also create your own reflection. And these, they're formatted to kind of help you get good visuals of what's happening in your classroom. So if you're interested in creating your own spreadsheet, that's something you can talk with your digital coach about. But we do have the links to the Google Forms and the Google Sheet all in one if that's something you're interested in learning more about. And that's everything we have for strategy 3 in terms of just finding ways to use that video to reflect and really adjust your instruction to better your instruction for your students.
So yeah, for the rest of this time, we're here if you want to like bounce ideas, you have questions, comments, concerns, we're here to chat with you. Otherwise, y'all have until 11:05 to get working independently on some whatever you need to do in relation to this module, and yeah, we'll be here.